I eventually looked at my business and I hated it. Like I just hated it. I hated what it, who it turned me into. I hated that I missed so many things. And I talk a lot about the fact that, Henry, my youngest, was born, and the day he was born was the day we got approval to build our venue through the county. And it's like this crazy story, but like, I don't remember anything from the first 3 years of his life because like, I just was so nose to the grindstone. And there's like this, I'm trying to get emotional about it, but there's just this regret of it. Like, sorry, I talk about it so much. Sometimes it hits me and sometimes it doesn't.
Hey everybody, this is Eddie Babbage, founder, CEO of Timeline Genius, and your host of the Wedding Industry Insider Podcast. I'm back with another great episode. I'm here with Dana Kadwell. Dana, it's so nice to have you on the show here. Dana, for those that don't know her, she's the founder of Hustle and Gather, which delivers speaking, consulting, and team training services to event professionals. Dana also has a background, 16 years, in fact, as a wedding planner. Dana, it's so great to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. I love talking all
Uh,
things about weddings.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was in the pre-interview. It just became very clear to me that this is going to be a great interview. Growing out of, and just to kind of tell people where we're going with this
Mhm.
interview, we're going to get into your experience, your extensive experience as a wedding planner, because I feel like that gives necessary context for the work that you're currently doing.
Mhm.
And then we're going to talk to, I think, the question that I put to you is like, you have helped wedding planners over the years as you've delivered your services. You know what you deliver that's
Mhm.
impactful, and the lessons that you teach about. We talk a lot about this, working on the business rather than just in
Mhm.
the business, like helping
Yeah.
people, wedding pros, step into the role of a true CEO, and why for you personally that has such meaning. And yeah, that's what I want to get into here. I
Yeah.
want to help people better make that transition. So before we do all of that, Dana, I just love it if you could, in your own brief words, tell people, a little bit more about your background and how you got to be where you currently are in the industry.
Yeah, I think my story is very similar to lots of wedding planners out there. I was getting married in 2006, so celebrating my 20th this year, which is super exciting. And I always joke that I was like a child. I was 22 when I got married. I was very young. But I just couldn't find the perfect spot, like the perfect venue that I wanted to get married at. And I was having lunch with my sister and we like kind of sketched this idea of a venue on a napkin. And we're like, this would be fun. We should open a venue one day, so on and so forth. But we are also scientists. So I have a degree in chemistry and physics, and she had a degree in biology. So we're very like data driven people. And this idea of opening a venue made sense, but then we're like, we don't know enough about the industry. We don't know like, what the market even needs. So like, let's become wedding planners. Like that looks like fun. Like, wouldn't that just be the
Ah,
best? Right. And so we did, and I did it part-time for a couple of years. I was a teacher. So I taught chemistry and physics in high school, and I did really love it, but I quickly realized that the life I wanted was not going to happen by being in the education system and in that
mhm.
way. And so I ended up going full time with it. And it was like one of those really weird years of either you were going to it was going to be what I think a friend told me once was a job that's a hobby, or you
Mm.
were going to like really put everything in it and make it be something. And so
Mhm.
that year, from like 12 weddings to like 40 weddings, and just really started making our name in the market and in our industry. And yeah, so I did that. And planning was the last thing I could let go of. Like even in 2014, so 7 years after we became planners, we opened our venue, but I still was a planner for many, many, many years because I loved it. It's what made me fall in love with the industry. And it's what made me fall in love with hospitality and service. And it's like just so near and dear to my heart, being able to show up for people on that wedding day. When I had to retire, and I had to retire from planning to be able to run these multiple businesses, it was a really hard decision. It was really sad, but ultimately it's led me down this path that I equally love as much.
Tell me a little bit more, Dana, about what it is. Like, I can hear that genuine, like, love for our industry. Can you
Mhm.
go a little deeper into that?
Yeah. So, um, I really struggled a lot from going from being a teacher to being in the wedding industry because, when I had these ideas of grandeur as a teenager and I knew I always wanted to be a teacher, I had teachers that really impacted and changed my life. And so I felt like I was doing this really good service to the world by being a teacher. And I still think that's very true. Teachers are freaking amazing and, love them, and it's an amazing profession. And so I really struggled when I realized that teaching just wasn't for me. Letting go of that, not just a dream of that, but just feeling like I was making an impact and a difference in the world, and feeling like going from that to weddings and events felt so just frivolous in a lot of ways, like, and so. But what I found is that you're showing up and serving people in a way that they've never experienced before. And typically, a wedding day is the first time a lot of people have experienced that amount of like customer service, or really someone catering to them and taking care of them. And it's not just your clients, but it's the moms, it's the dads, it's the grandmas, it's all the things. And the impact you have by just creating a community in that, whether it's a 4 hour time block of a wedding or an event or whatnot, is what I have found to be so impactful. And so for me, when I'm meeting with people that are in the industry that have that heart for service, what is so sad to me is when people struggle with trying to make a go of it, trying to figure out how to make this business work, how to create the profits they need to be able to sustain the life they have, but they love it so much. And I think that there is this intersection where you can be super passionate about your job and like love it, and want to help everybody and anything, and then also be able to make money doing it so that you could have your own future in your life. And so that's where I know it took me a while to find that intersection, because I felt like it was one or the other. Either you were a soul sucking business owner who was nickel and diming everyone to death, or you were the person that was like giving your services away and because you just loved it so much. Like, it was really hard to find that meeting point where you could basically have a financial future as well as, you know, love what you do and be able to serve people in a really, radical and amazing way.
Wow, I just had so many thoughts as you were talking, Dana. I just am really grateful for this podcast and the opportunity to meet people like you. Like, so much of what you're saying, I was just like, that is beautiful, like
Mm.
really beautiful. It's funny, I won't digress down the path of geeking out on physics, but I love physics. Just finished rereading the Albert Einstein biography. I'm reread it because my son is reading it, and it's just like such a beautiful thing. And
Mm-hmm.
also what you were saying about being a teacher. I mean, I'm a parent. I have kids in school. I do a lot of sort of, teaching at home. And I'm just like, you are shaping souls. Like, that's
Yep.
God's work for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
shaping the minds and hearts of children in that
Mm-hmm.
impressional foundational stage. But just hearing you so eloquently, I think also talk about the sacred. I've said before in other contexts, I think wedding planning is God's work as well. I didn't
Yep.
appreciate that as much back when I got married, but starting my
Yeah.
company and now serving wedding planners, you can
Mm-hmm.
see, I mean, yeah, that day, I mean, is such a special, like, sacred, love
Mm-hmm.
filled occasion. And you are, in a lot of respects, like the mastermind, the
Mm-hmm.
master architect of that day. So, yeah, you can just hear the sincerity in what you're saying and the true servant's heart, which is now not necessarily being directed at the couple, but being directed at the people that I try to minister to through this
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about, we talked a little bit about this in the pre-interview. What struggle
Mm.
did you encounter with your planning that
Yeah.
ultimately led to you kind of having to
Yeah.
go a different path? Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. I think it's hard to, when I didn't go to school to be an entrepreneur. So when you become an entrepreneur and that wasn't your intention, like changing your mindset around that is a learning curve in general. I had a lot of, honestly, I had a lot of guilt, when I quit my job because, we're not independently wealthy people. And so I felt like I had to like take everything and I had to hustle it like so hard to make it work. And by doing that, there was a lot of failures. There was a lot of failures in terms of like I didn't set my business up for success. I didn't know how to scale it well. I was taking clients that weren't serving me, that were, draining every passion that I had because they just weren't the right fit. But
Mm,
ultimately, what had happened for me is my business became my God in a lot of ways. It was
mm,
it was the thing that I felt like I needed to be successful at to prove that I'm worthy of whatever, right? Whether it's, the accolades from my colleagues, whether it's from being able to work at this certain venue, whether it's from being published at the time, like Style Me Pretty was like the pinnacle of anybody's career. Like all of these things you were working and hustling so hard. And what it did is that one track mind, I forgot the whole reason why I was doing it in the first place. It was to create a
wow.
life that I loved. And so I
Mm,
eventually looked at my business and I hated it. Like I just hated it. I hated what it who it turned me into. I hated that I missed so many things. And I talk a lot about the fact that, Henry, my youngest, was born, and the day he was born was the day we got approval to build our venue through the county. And it's like this crazy story, but like I don't remember anything from the first 3 years of his life because like I just was so nose to the grindstone. And there's like this, I'm trying to get emotional about it, but there's just this regret of it. Like, sorry, I talk about it so much. Sometimes
no,
it hits me and
please.
sometimes it doesn't.
Yes, yes.
He just turned 14 too. And so like, there's like that, like, you're like, oh my God, he's like growing up so fast. But um, there's just this like, as a parent, this ache that like you don't remember, like I can, like you don't remember the first word, you don't remember the first step. Like you can see a picture and know you're supposed to remember that, but you don't have that memory. And it's all because you chose to put your time, your energy, your efforts into something that is fleeting. Business is great, but it's fleeting at the end of the day. Your family is forever. And so there was this moment where I had to like really reconcile with myself of like, I'm building this thing for what? At the end of the day, I could have nothing at the end of it. My kids won't want to talk to me because they'll like, oh, my mom was never around. I won't be married. I felt that deeply, like this is not going to last. It's the love of my life. And so there was just so much of that where you had to figure out how to, yes, be successful for sure. Like I don't want to be in the hole for it, but I don't want to sacrifice the thing that I loved. Like I knew that I loved serving people. So how do you do that? How do you do both? And so that was really like a couple of years of just really intense just redirection and like, setting those boundaries and figuring out what were my non-negotiables, like where what am I willing to sacrifice. Um and it wasn't easy, I'm not gonna lie. It was really hard and it was a roller coaster at times, but eventually you found that plateau of like knowing, okay, like getting back on track, I guess I could say. So
First of all, thank you so much for being so open. I really appreciate that. I feel like
mm,
that's where the real value and magic comes in these interviews is when somebody's secure enough to kind of
mm,
open up the heart and
mm.
mind and show people like this is what's really going on. Because I think in today's world, we get this sanitized version of what's happening in everybody's life. Like
So
the
true.
authenticity
Yeah.
just really like
Mm,
glows in that.
mm.
And as you were talking, like I had a couple quick thoughts. One, business is hard.
So
I've like
hard.
started 3 companies myself, and I feel like I just had the idea as you were talking, like we have to give ourselves some grace here. Like I think
Hmm.
people think I'm just going to start this company and it's off to the races. Like sometimes it takes multiple tries.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
and that's the way everything works, right? But I
Yep.
think we have this conception like, oh, if mine's not just floating again, maybe that's what you're seeing on social media. So I'm doing something wrong. But like it's hard.
It's hard.
And also being a parent, I know that what you're saying, Dana, and the authenticity and the emotion that you're sharing, it's going to resonate with you. I know obviously a lot of people in this line of work are trying to balance
Mm.
being a wife, being a
Hmm.
mother, with being an all in planner and feeling the weight in today's society
Hmm.
of like, no, I am part of the breadwinning equation. Maybe the whole, like, it
Right.
matters what I'm earning. And that tension,
Hmm.
I can hear again, the emotion in your voice, but I don't know that any parent ever really just nails the like, because you want to give 110% to two things, right?
Hmm.
And that just doesn't work. Tell me, I guess, Dana, and this is kind of, I guess, the centerpiece of the interview. We know that planners are out there right now listening to
Hmm.
us that can really empathize with what you're saying. What can we share that might help somebody out there that's in a situation, maybe not exactly like yours, but
Hmm.
something similar, to help them still do this thing that they love
Hmm.
professionally, but not to end up where you ended up feeling
Hmm.
like resentful of
Hmm.
how it kind of consumed their life? What
Yeah.
would you share with those people?
Yes, there's a couple of things. I think the first thing, when I was going through this, I had to ask myself was what was my line? And so I remember I was talking to somebody about it and I was like, well, I want to show up for all of the things. Like I want to 100% be there. And she's like, that's dumb and that's unrealistic. That's not going to happen. And she's like, and if you have that expectation of yourself, you are going to fail. And it
Right,
was like, and I think I said it because I thought I was supposed to say it because being a
right.
parent or, and I can only speak as being a mother, that you're
Sure.
supposed to be there all the time. Like, so your answer
Yes.
should be, well, I am doing this for my children. I am doing this for
Yes.
their future. And there was this really gut check moment for me. And yes, they are a part of my equation 100%. Like they're not like
Hmm.
not in the equation, but I am
Hmm.
doing this because when I am fulfilling my dreams, when I am, doing something that I love, I am a better person. Like I am a
Yes.
better mother. I am a better
Yes.
spouse. I am a better daughter, sister, all of the things. And so it's not, I don't, so you wanted to go from one end where you're sacrificing, your family for your business and going all the way to the other end where you're sacrificing your business for your family. And it's like, that's also just as toxic and terrible, right? Because then you're going to
Hmm.
resent your family that they took you away from this thing that you were building and that you loved. So I had to find that middle ground. And so for me, and that has changed in different seasons of life. When they were younger, there was, I wanted to be home for bedtime like 75% of the time because that was my favorite time of the day, right? Now that
Hmm.
they're teenagers, like they're in sports and they have Boy Scouts and they have all these things. And so for me, my number is 80%. Like if I show up to 80% of the things that they're doing, then I'm good and they feel good. They feel supported and creating a voice for them of saying like there's some things like where I'm like looking at the calendar, I'm like, okay, is it really like how's this track me? Is this a one that you're like breaking a record on, you think, or like, you know what I mean? And like letting them weigh in on it as well and kind of giving them a clue as because they're older, they can understand it because they're 14 and 16. Um, you know, that I'm making every attempt to do it, but like I also have all of these, businesses and whatnot. And the amount of pride my kids have for me is insane. Like it's just insane. They are so proud of me because I've brought them into that part of my life. I didn't try to keep it separate. So I
Mm.
think
Mm.
the first part is what is your line? And I really want to encourage people that that line moves and changes with every season of your life. If you have a newborn, that line is very different than if you
Tell me
have a
about it.
teenager. It's
Tell
very
me about it.
different. Like,
Yeah.
and it's not that one stage is harder than the other. And I'll never tell you like, oh my gosh, the toddlers are so hard. No, they're just different. And so you have to adjust the expectations for your life based on where that line in your life is at that point. So that's the first thing. And then once you find that line, it's figuring out, okay, what do you need to put in place in your business to be able to not cross that, right? And so for me, it was hiring somebody. And it started small. It started with, okay, look, I know, like, let's look at wedding planning, for example. Like I've always said that event management is how I pay my bills. It's how I paid the bottom dollar bills. And then you had your fulls and your partials is really what created your profit. I was the most effective when it came to fulls and partials. That's what I loved. It's what I could, clients wanted me. They didn't want the associate, planner or
Hmm.
whatnot. So
Hmm.
I knew I needed to give up. If I wanted to be able to hold this line in my family, then I couldn't do 30 weddings a year. I could maybe do
Right.
12 really good, high quality weddings, but the other 18, they had to be event management. They had to be somebody else. So I had to hire
Hmm.
someone to take that on. And as the business grew and as the business evolved and you're bringing on more, I was bringing on more planners and we were doing, 100 weddings a year. What then became the stressor was management. So
Mm.
now I'm doing all these weddings, right? I'm doing these 10 to 12 weddings a year that are, great quality, wonderful events.
Hmm.
But now I have 5 planners that I'm also managing. And that became,
Mhm.
that was making that like where I was really kind of crossing that line of my family. And so it was okay, now I need to hire a manager. I need to have some one that's in between me and the rest of the associates. And so it's figuring out, and I'm not saying it was perfect. I mean, I made lots of mistakes.
Mhm.
I made some bad hires. I had a lot of
Mhm.
failures in it, but ultimately what allowed me to get back up and try it again was because my goal was, this is how I want my life to look like. And so it was realizing that either I had to decide that my planning company was only going to do 12 weddings, or
Mhm.
I had to figure out how to create more space and scalability. And then there's a tons of nuances from there. I mean, like we can go into like hours about creating SOPs and processes and trainings and all that stuff. But ultimately, that is what I had to decide, is where was that line? And then how can I hold that line? And what would that require of me as a business owner?
As a wedding planner, you know how important it is to create detailed wedding day timelines for your events. But creating your timelines can be a tedious and time-consuming job. Until now. Because Timeline Genius lets you create beautiful, detailed wedding day timelines with ease. And it keeps everything you need on the wedding day in one central place. Here's how it works. First, Timeline Genius saves all your clients, vendors, and venues in your Rolodex, so you don't lose time looking for their information. And when you're ready to create a new timeline, you simply enter the key information for your wedding. Click a button, and voila! Timeline Genius magically gives you a customized timeline for your event, where all the details are laid out and the times are calculated for you. From there, you can easily edit your timeline by adding or deleting items, inserting images, changing font styles, and customizing everything to your liking. You can also instantly shift the times for as many items as you want. And when it comes to your clients and vendors, Timeline Genius lets you give them the highest level of service. You can send them tailored timelines, showing only the items they're involved in. And you can collaborate by inviting them to a mobile-friendly, web-based version of the timeline. You can even set text message reminders to automatically go out on the wedding day. And once you've completed your perfect timeline, you can download it or email it out as a beautifully styled PDF. And that's Timeline Genius, a smart software that will help take your wedding planning to the next level. Start your free trial today.
I love that. And kind of going to step one, which is the first step of sort of bringing intentionality to this
Mm-hmm.
process, where you set deliberately, intentionally, this is where I want that line to be. I have an interesting vantage point here because with my wife,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like women still have this societally bred expectation that they're going to be super mom from the 1950s who does everything related to their children, right? And at that time didn't have a job, right? And the
Right.
realities of today's household being that like women are very often out in the world as financial providers, like building their own career. But there's almost this like kind of guilt that
Mm-hmm.
like I see. And tell me if I'm obviously very interested in your perspective, both as a woman and as somebody that's coached others. Like, do you feel like maybe women need to, again, I have the idea of giving grace, like just
Mm-hmm.
like it's okay to want to have a career and to spend time on that. You should be intentional here, but I feel like there's like a little bit of a it's okay not to be at 100% of your kids' activities because that's unrealistic. Like, what are your thoughts kind of
Mm-hmm.
on this kind
Yeah.
of general thing?
I think that's very, very, very true. And I would really love to make a caveat here that a great partner makes all the difference. So
Yeah,
when you
absolutely.
have a great partner, you can give yourself grace. And I would, I
Right.
think there are probably some people listening who are listening, and my heart breaks for them that they don't have the ability to give themselves grace because they don't have the support of that partner for
Fair
whatever
enough.
reason it might be, whether they're a single parent or whether they're just still trying to figure out that. And my marriage isn't perfect and it hasn't been always perfect, but there were a lot of really hard conversations that had to be had. But I think regardless, and I will tell you, like my spouse does so freaking much, and
Yeah.
and he's wonderful, and he shows up, and he is great. There's still a weight and I don't know if it's female brains, I don't know. There's still the mental plate. Granted, I can take the thing and say, okay, I need you to schedule the kids' doctor's appointments, and they're going to do it. But very rarely is it that he's thinking he has to schedule the kids' doctor's appointments. Um, which, I don't think it's a fault. I think it's just how our brains are wired differently. It's just different,
And
so
societally, it's like, as a
sure.
species, this has been the way it's
Yes.
been for various
Yeah.
reasons that are less applicable today. But I think
Yeah.
100% everything you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but I think that, regardless, I've always found that transparency is helpful, and even in a family setting. So there, even just this past season of life, I've had some really tough things happen, and we set the kids down and like, look, this is what's going on. This is, why, like, I personally haven't been my 100% best self. This is why
Mhm.
maybe I seem more tired, or I seem a little bit more overwhelmed, or whatever. And allowing your family to be that support for you is so powerful and impactful. And it started even, when the kids were younger. Like when I was going through this like period of time of like trying to kind of restructure my life, the kids, they were like, I think they were just like 6, 7 years ago. So they were like, what, I don't know, I can do the math, like, 10 and 8, right? Even having
Mhm.
that conversation with them then, like they're able to comprehend that. But I think what you will notice is the kids, they're not going to remember that you didn't show up for dinner that one Saturday, right? They're not going to remember that you didn't come to that one track meet. What they're going to remember is that you were there, that you were present for most of the time. Like, and I think that that's the expectation that we have, because we just, I guess, assume that, and probably it's our own personal trauma or whatever, I don't
Yeah.
really know,
Hmm.
but we make the assumption that if we're not there every single Friday night for dinner, then they're going to think, oh, my mom was never there. And that's just not the case. Kids remember the majority. Like, they remember the intention of it. They remember you, like, yeah, okay, I wasn't able to be at, your game, but like I watched it on the live stream on the plane, and I'm texting your dad the whole time, like, oh my God, she made a three. That's amazing. Like, and you're seeing that, like that. And that way I'm still showing up. So yeah, grace is definitely something is really hard to extend to ourselves. And I don't even think it's a female thing. I think it's just a person human thing. Like, we do not give
Sure.
ourselves grace. We will take it when someone else extends it to us, but we don't give it to ourselves very easily.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. There are probably a lot of ways in which we are harder on ourselves than we
Mm,
stop to even realize. Um, let's say, Dana, that somebody is listening and they're like, okay, like, I do believe that it's possible, even if I'm never going to be able to be 100% in both
mhm,
spheres, home and work. Like, I do believe that it's theoretically possible here for me to just be intentional and to at least set strategically, like,
mm,
a sort of line of division between the
mhm.
two, so that I can try to strike that balance. And then they reach the next question of, okay, I know this is how I want the balance to be, right? X number of hours, at work, for example, and everything else is home. How do they actually implement that? Because it's
Yeah.
easy to say, oh, I
Yeah.
only want to do 40 hours and I don't want to answer
Sure.
emails after 5. How do you
Yeah.
implement that?
Yeah. So, I whenever I'm talking to somebody, the first thing I have them do this activity, it's you take 2 weeks of your time, and you write down every single task that you do for 2 weeks, like just the most mundane, easiest tasks that you do within that 2 weeks. It's hard to say do it for a day, because being a business owner, different things come up in different time periods of the month. But 2 weeks is typically a really good snapshot of time for you to really figure out what it is that you actually do. My favorite question's always been when you say, like, well, what do you do? And they're like, I don't, I mean, I answer emails. And it's just really
Yeah,
hard to remember, because you do a lot on
sure.
autopilot,
Yeah.
you're just constantly going through it. So, um, that's the first task. And then we kind of create like these lanes of, like, this is something I can't give up. And it's not because you don't want to, or it's because you literally cannot. So, and I always say the three big buckets are, you as an entrepreneur, you can't give up full on leadership. Like, you're gonna have to lead the team in some way, shape, or form. Whether you are managing is different, but you're gonna have to lead the team. So you're gonna have build in some time to have those conversations. Typically, the vision of the company, that is your job. So determining where your next moves are, what markets you're going to go into, you can't really outsource that well enough, in my opinion. And then it's financial. Like, yes, you can maybe outsource some bookkeeping and some taxes, but ultimately you still have to have a pulse on your dollars and your cents. And so you kind of create those lanes and then you say, okay, what is something that I can outsource right now? Like right now, I have a really good process that I could put down on paper. I can explain this really well. And what's really interesting is a lot of people, there's very few that fall into that lane because, and it falls into the next one, which is what could I eventually outsource with a great process, with a great system? And that's where we start a
Mhm.
lot is that there's, being an entrepreneur, especially a solopreneur, you don't think to document like how you do a certain, like how take in an inquiry lead, or how do you do a tour, or how do you do a consult, like all of those things, because it's just ingrained in you. It's something you've learned, through trial error, and it's just how you do it. But when you put a process and you put a system down, it becomes repeatable, it becomes trainable, and it becomes actionable. And so that's the first thing, is figuring that out and then determining, what does that job look like? Like, is it a fractional something? Like, are you asking for a fractional COO? Are you, you know, looking for someone who's only working an extra 15 hours a week? Are you looking for a full-time employee at this point? Like, and it really helps you determine the type of employee or the person that you need. And I've always said, when it comes to business overwhelm, people are the answer. It's not money, it's people. People are the answer. They're the ones that are going to create that space and that guidance for you. And there is something amazing that happens that if you have the ability to lead your team in a really positive way and have the vision, right? And be able to be the CEO of your company truly, like it opens up a world that you never knew was possible in terms of like profits and margins and stuff like that, because you're acting in the way you should be, right? Like it's what you're thriving in that environment. And so yeah, so I think that's the first thing, is figuring out like what is the thing that you have to hold on to and what is the thing that you can't outsource. And that's really how we started with it. And it's I still do it. I actually do that exercise once a year, because what you'll find is you'll randomly get more things on your plate that you just didn't realize. Like, they'll sneak on, and then every year it's like a reset of like, okay, what am I doing that I should be, having somebody else handle for me, essentially.
I love that, Dana. And you mentioned SOP, and what we're talking about here, I think is building up to, and that's a
Hmm.
very concrete thing that we can get into that will help people. What got you kind of dialed in to this angle
Yeah.
of, wait a minute, let me stop and take inventory and document things and SOPs? Like, what got you kind of on that
Yeah.
wavelength?
It's a great question. It was actually what I will call one of the hardest years was had our first hire, and I thought I was communicating perfectly well, which I was not at the time. But like, it was every time we brought somebody on, it was just such a long onboarding process. It felt like
Mm,
there were so many mistakes that were being made, and it was so frustrating, and I got frustrated, like, well, why am I hiring somebody when I am spending just as much time going behind them and fixing it? Like, it felt like
yes.
very futile at the end of the day. So there was this one moment, and I do tell a story, so if you've heard it, I apologize. But um it was like a random weekend, and we had like 4 or 5 events that weekend, and I get a text message from one of the planners saying, hey, can I go ahead and buy what was it, like a bobby pins or safety pins on the company card? And it's like, I have had this conversation with everybody 1,000 times. Like, I have given you the approval to get all these things. So I was like so frustrated. So I went home and I created this flow chart, like, just of like, when you can buy things on the company card. And honestly,
Mm.
if I'm being honest, I was being a little petty because I was just so annoyed. I was just so
Ah,
frustrated. I was just like, I can't say this any clearer. And I sent it out. And the amount of emails I got back from people that were like, oh my God, this is so helpful. Thank you so much. Because at the end of the day, they hated texting me. They didn't want to ask the question. They wish they knew the answer. They wish they had the confidence to just make the decision and not have to bother me, because
and a place
ultimately,
they could go to find out the
yes.
clearing.
Yes. And
Yeah.
so I was like, oh, this is really powerful. And so then I became like an SOP, like crazy person. So then I was like, everything needs if you're listening, standard operating procedure, an SOP. But what it did is, once we created all of these systems and all these processes, Like the onboarding was so quick. The amount of questions I got was, and I still love questions. I'm not afraid of questions, but I got so many less questions. The amount of mistakes I mean, we were like rocking and rolling. Like very rarely were we having to clean something up because everything was there. All the infrastructure was there. And it was even down to the fact that like, okay, you're talking to a client and we have an SOP, like a client's upset about whatever. Here is what you can offer them. Here is what you don't need my approval for. Here's what you can go ahead and say we're going to do. And because they can answer whatever conflict is happening with that client instantaneously, it creates a better experience for obviously the planner, but also for that client. Like they feel valued, they feel heard, they feel like that person has authority. So now they're going to, trust that planner 10 times more because they had the authority to offer, oh, you know what, I'm so sorry that happened. Here's what I'm going to do for you is we're going to do XYZ and make sure, fix this or whatever the situation is. So it really created very high functioning planners that were on the team that did honestly ended up being better planners than me at the end of the day. Like people like, we want you. And I'm like, I don't really think you do. Like, Becca over there is actually 10 times better than I am. Like she'll be better at this job, but
Wow. That's
yeah.
amazing. So is this because the examples that you gave of like why this was so powerful and beneficial related to your team and
Mhm.
streamlining operations, is this still a valuable exercise like building out SOPs even if somebody is a solopreneur at this stage of their company?
Yeah, for sure. I think because it allows you the space to, when you do need to scale, you can scale more quickly. I always felt
Mhm.
like for the wedding industry, it's never a slow burn. It's always like you have nothing and then you like boom overnight. And
Mhm.
there's so few stories you hear people of where it's like this very slow buildup. And so it's really preparing yourself to be able to scale if that is ultimately your goal. The other great advantage of it too is if you're a solopreneur and you are the only person, let's just say like you like get the flu or you get pregnant or whatever the case may be, by creating a process and a procedure, you're able to outsource, hire, hand it off to somebody else and know that your client's going to be super well taken care of. So I call it like really my insurance plan in a lot of ways. Like it creates that the confidence that when I have to make a hard decision, which I've never missed an event ever my
Mhm.
entire career. But I knew that if I had to, anyone could have picked up my Google Drive folder with all the process and systems that I had in place and be able to execute that event, you know, exactly how it was supposed to be. Or, pick up that planning process or whatever the case may be. So I think it's twofold. I think it's definitely, it creates a safety net for the solopreneur, but then it also really allows you that when you're ready, like you can just jump on it. You can hire the person. You're not like, okay, wait, I need to hire somebody, but now I need to spend, a month and a half creating all these processes and systems and getting these things in place so I can hire this person. It's already done for you.
It's funny. I had two additional thoughts as you were talking. You tell me if these resonate with you or not. One, that in doing the exercise, like there might also be this like unexpected benefit of like, yeah, right now it's just me, but you may now start to have a much
Mm-hmm.
clearer idea of what you're doing, how much time you're spending, what you enjoy and don't enjoy. And you may get the hamster turning about like, oh, I should be delegating this. And then, secondly, on an almost metaphysical level, I feel like there's something to the notion of being ready and prepared now for the vision that you're expecting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's this weird, I won't tell the whole story, but Steve Harvey, the comedian, he gives
Mm-hmm.
these sort of motivational talks. I find him really interesting. The guy was homeless at one point in life. Now he's a multimillionaire. And he said he wanted a new car. He was living with his mom, but he said he had this old broken down car in the driveway.
Mm-hmm.
And she kept telling him to get rid of the old broken down car. And with the message, he's like, I finally understood what she was saying. She's like, if you're trying to envision that you're going to get this new car, you need to go ahead and show the universe that you're ready for that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, get this other one that's on cinder blocks out of the way. And he was like, sure enough, once he did this, and I know this is a little woo woo, but he's like, once I got rid of the other one and made space for the new one came. And I think there's some sort of way in which if you don't have the infrastructure to actually handle the volume of weddings that you're dreaming about doing, in a weird way, you're probably less likely
Yeah.
to get those. weddings,
It's
you know?
it's so true. Because I think that we are, it's not, I don't want to call it self-sabotage, but it's like in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, I can't add on this business because I don't have help. I don't have the ability. Like and it's exactly what you said. It is a mindset thing. And
Yeah.
if your intentionality is to, have multiple planners on your team and be able to execute, X amount of events or whatever the case may be, you do need to create that structure, because when that structure is there, like you're going to be able to you're making decisions based on a business decision, not on an emotional or an overwhelmed decision. Like, and that's the thing that I learned in business is the rash decisions, the emotional decisions, the ones that were out of desperation were always my failing points, always my failing points. But the ones that came because I had cleared my space for it, because I created the structure for it, because I was intentional with my time preparing for it, even though I didn't know I was preparing for it. Um, those have always been like my biggest successes.
Yeah, it makes sense. And it's in keeping with what we always hear, kind of like act as if, be the person
Yes.
today, have the structure today that like is what you're going to need to have the level of success that you want. Like be that today and let it be attracted rather than, to you rather than you just
Right.
trying to kind of pursue it. To kind of go down from metaphysical level to more reality brass tacks,
Yeah.
are these Google Docs that you just kind of create?
Mm-hmm.
Like how, like
Yeah. Yeah.
concretely, like let's say someone's like, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, I want to do SOPs. Like,
Yeah.
what's the how behind that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. So obviously when I was doing this, Google Docs were like my jam, and I did a ton of screenshots and whatnot. But now as technology, we have wonderful tech.
Yep.
Loom is super helpful. Like I do a ton of like video, like screen records, which is
Mm-hmm.
wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Chat
Mm-hmm.
GPT is a great way to create infrastructure. There's a couple of like things you can do, like Scribe is one that I've had a couple clients that have used, which is really helpful. But it's really just a matter of understanding, like, and as I have evolved, I've, how I do things is different how somebody else does things. So like even how I get information is very different from how someone else gets information. So I might have a Loom video, but then I'll also have the transcript that goes with it. I'll have multiple ways for someone to learn something specific, especially when it comes to technology. But yeah, there's lots of different ways. The biggest thing I tell people when you're creating an SOP is the steps are super important, obviously, like how you do it, the process, super important. What is just as important is the why, because you we especially with this generation of people, of employees, they need to feel connected to the reason why they're doing something. So like I use this example of, we went through this process with the team, is like we what I call rigorous documentation. We want to document every conversation we have with a client, text message, phone call, and it feels really tedious. And I
Mm-hmm.
had this SOP written out, and I had a planner come to me, and she was like, "Look, I kind of know why you want to do this," but she's like, "It just feels like you're really just trying to check up on me. Like you're just, micromanage me." And I was like, "Oh no, that's actually not why at all." Like, and so I explained the reasoning why I wanted this process to happen. I explained all the situations, like, what if you get sick? What if this? Like, so on and so forth, right? All these things. And she was like, "Oh, that makes perfect sense." And so the person I was struggling with to do this process now is doing it fully and with fidelity, because she understood the why behind it. So I tell people that when you're creating a process and system, it's not just because I said so. It's like, no, it's because we believe in, a great client experience. And because we are trying to create this exceptional client journey, this is one thing that we need to do to make sure our clients feel cared for and seen. And even from a perspective, like, let's say you don't have a teammate, but like you are a solopreneur, you have a new team every single weekend. Every single weekend that you have an event, you are part of a team. And so I even started doing this process with, like, so for example, a florist, right? Like, hey, here is the process I want to follow when it comes to getting our, proposals or quotes or whatever the situation, however we're going to work together. And I had one florist that was like, "This feels like you're micromanaging me, and this feels like you just don't trust me." And I was like, "No, actually, that's not why. And let me explain to you the reason why I like this process and how it makes you look better, how I'm able to advocate for you, and how I'm able to be a better teammate to this whole process by doing this." And she was like, "Oh, that makes sense. Perfect. Yes." And falls in line. So I think it's really like it's that getting rid of the like, oh, I want to do this because it makes me feel good, because it makes me have control over something. And even though that could be the back of your mind, like, okay, I want to control the outcome of this. When you're dealing with people, you have to give it a real why. Like, oh, yes, I want to control it, but I want to control it because I care so much about clients. I believe in hospitality. I want to make sure that my vendors feel supported. I want to make sure that my clients know that I'm on their side. Whatever the reasoning is, like, you have to be that transparent with all the processes so that people are bought into it. And that's the thing that people fail a lot when they come with a SOP. They're like, well, I created an SOP, but no one wants to do it. I'm like, well, did you tell them why we need to do it? Like,
Mm.
what's the reasoning behind it? So give them the why.
How long do you think this takes? Not that you can ever really spike the ball and
Yeah.
say it's done forever. Obviously, you need to update these. But I'll tell you why I asked Dana is because we all know, and just hearing you talk about this, like it goes back to what I said. Business is hard. Like there's so
Mm-hmm.
much. I mean, heck, I'm getting stressed thinking about our SOPs listening, right? Like, and it not like it's actually positive because this is exactly right. I think everybody listening right now is like,
Yeah.
she preaches the truth, right? We all know, but like, yeah, like I don't want people to feel like just yeah, it sounds great, but I'm not going to do it because ain't nobody got time for that. Like, can you kind of speak to the practicalities and how
Yeah.
much time somebody should ballpark for this?
Yeah. I don't know if I give you a time ballpark, but what I always tell people is, just do like, pick a tangible, like, uh, goal, right? So maybe that's just do one a week, do one a month, you know,
Yeah.
just pick one thing that and I say, start with the thing that you know how to do really well, like that you feel super confident in. Even if it's a task that you're never going to outsource, just go ahead, create the SOP, get used to creating the SOP. And figure out, like, kind of your cadence of writing or whatnot. But there are so many, like chat GPT is amazing. It will get, you can say, hey, make a process for this. This is kind of what I'm thinking. And they'll create the outline. Then you're just tweaking it after that point, right? It's,
Yep.
hey, okay, I am setting up a new automation in our CRM. Let me show you how I do it. You're just literally hitting screen record, doing the job you're already doing. You're already spending time doing, and
Hmm.
just talking through what you're doing and why, and how you're doing it, and what buttons to click, and how to hit save, and all those things. And so it's just try to weave it into what you're already doing, but give yourself tangible goals. And I typically, this is not going to happen in a week. It's not going to happen in a month. And give yourself saying, like, hey, by the end of, the year, I want to have 80% of my SOPs done, 90% of my SOPs done, as much as I can get done, or whatever. If you're a solopreneur, if you have a team, make your team members do it. Like, you hired them.
Mm.
Say, hey,
Right.
like, you're in charge of client care. Can you write down your process for me? Right? Like, go ahead and write down your workflow and how you, and like what you do, right? And make them work for you, because that's what you hired them for. But
Yeah.
essentially.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and then you review, you edit, you
Yes.
discuss,
Yes.
you
All the
tweak and make
things.
sure that, but you don't
Yep.
need to start it from scratch and do
Right.
all the SOPs yourself. That would be
Yes.
foolish. I mean, you don't even know the job probably at this point
Right.
as well as some of the people that are doing
Yep.
it. So,
It's so true.
um, this is a slight tangent, Dana. So you've been a planner, you've been helping planners, um, kind of open ended here.
Mm-hmm.
In the cases where you've had the biggest positive impact on
Mm,
a wedding planner that you're working with, what is the gift that you gave them? Like, what did you help them do that
mm.
was like that thing that was most impactful and beneficial?
It's a great question. Um, it's hard to answer that fully. I think just based on feedback. I think the biggest thing is just the permission to not have to do it all. I think planning is such a personal, like, it's a personal career. Like, you are selling your name, you are selling your vision, you're selling your aesthetic, you're selling your process, you're selling so much of who you are, that there is this fear that if you were to bring someone else in, or you were to take a step back, or change any of that the clients are going to be upset about it, or you're going to be unsuccessful or whatnot. I think for me, it's really, and then it's creating the business that you want. I think that you also get really tied into and stuck on the shoulds. Like the word should never be in our vocabulary as entrepreneurs. Like it's like how many times do you hear someone like, oh my gosh, I know that I should write SOPs, or I should go to this networking meeting, or I should, should this, should that. And I think it's no, it's whatever makes sense. There's no should. It's just what do you need in your life? Like how do you want to, scaffold your business? How do you want to create those boundaries to have the life that you want? And who cares if the person next to you think it's stupid? Who cares if
Mm,
the person next to you is booking 100 weddings? It doesn't
mm,
matter because that's not what you want. You don't
mm,
want to work 100 weddings. It
mm,
doesn't make you less than because you've actually honed in and created a life where you're happy and you're successful and you're healthy. Like our health is everything. And the amount that we sacrifice our health every single day to the grind and the hustle, it's astounding. And like, and I mean, I am such preaching to myself here. Like I have been in those situations, but I think it's, and then allowing ourselves to show up when it matters the most, So I feel like to me, that's the biggest gift that when I'm talking to people that I can give them. And I've seen real change in people that I've worked with of making just scaffolding their life to what makes sense for them and not what makes sense for, what everyone says we should be doing.
I think I already know that. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I love it. I think our audience already has a sense for the answer to this, but who are you tailor made to work with? Like, what,
Mm.
especially wedding planners, would you say this is the person that, like, when we connect, magic is going to happen? Like, who's that
Yeah.
ICP, ideal client profile for you?
Oh, I think anyone that's just willing to have the hard conversations, who's open to change. I think anytime you get a client, in my perspective, that feels like they want me to confirm what they like, just to confirm their own thoughts. Like that's not what I'm here for. I will validate you for sure, where you're at, but I think it's and ready to do the work. So I think having the time, and so to me, it's really important. And I don't love long term relationships in general. I mean, I love long term friendships, but when we're talking about consulting, it's like, you know, I don't need to work with you for a year to get where we're going. Like this is sometimes it's even just one VIP day where we can like dig deep and get into it, right? Sometimes it might be two, sometimes it might just be a month. Like I feel like for me, there's not a reason to have this year-long conversation because that's to me like a therapist's job. Like my job really is to figure out actionable things that we can do right now in the time period that you have. And so I work with when I work with wedding planners, it's typically in their down season. So like, no need to add the stress in October when you're like crazy busy. That's, unnecessary. So just people who are just ready to make that change, ready to hear some hard things and yeah, and get to work. I mean, it's simple solutions that just take time.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm in a coaching program. I often say this, but I feel like investing in ourselves and our
Hmm.
education, professional development is the highest ROI expenditure, though it always paradoxically feels scary on the front end to part with the money. You're like, but wait, that's so much. And then you do it and you're like, oh my God. Like if you look,
Hmm.
especially over a time frame of years, you're like,
Hmm.
the ROI on that was through the roof. And it's funny, this
Yeah.
coaching program I'm in, the guy that kind of runs it was saying, as we were goal setting, he's like, I want you guys to be realistic. And if you're gonna set some meteoric, like stratospheric level goal, you need to know that that requires like pulling out like some very heavy stops. And he's like, most of you aren't going to do that. And those that are, it's going to be from people. I
Hmm.
just thought that was really interesting because this is
Yep.
a guy that's like seen businesses really scale. And he called it out. He was like, it's going to be that you get somebody on your team or that you invest in like coaching that like, and he wasn't even referring to himself. He's like, it could be others. And running this podcast, I see there's so much information out there
Hmm.
that like wedding planners can avail themselves of. They need to be thoughtful, strategic, and
Sure.
evaluate carefully. But yeah, that this is kind of how you take like quantum leaps. I mean,
Hmm.
imagine if you went back in a time machine, Dana, and
I can only imagine.
you had 5 hours to talk to your former self. I mean,
Yeah.
I assume that would just be dramatic, like life changing, like what those
Yeah.
5 hours could be,
I
right?
mean, yeah, well, yeah, but I mean, I'm living it right now.
Yeah,
So like
right.
I just purchased two new venues essentially. And the my ability to take these venues that were struggling and bring them into success
Yeah, of
is 10 times faster because I know what I know now.
course.
And
Yes.
there is always a hindsight's 2020 whatever, but very much so it's just it's putting into practice all of like I appreciate those failures so much because they've turned me into who
Yes.
I am today. And there's
Yes.
so much of that, like, and what I would love to kind of end on today is that we talked a lot about giving ourselves grace. And I remember I was doing this podcast with somebody, and I was telling a story about, my son, and she looked at me and she's like, you have to forgive yourself. She's like, because you're
That was right.
romanticizing
Yeah.
something at the end of the day. She's like, who knows? Like, everyone hates the toddler years, like, and she was like, and she's like, not to make light of it. And she's like, but at some point you take this gift that you were given, right? This ability to reset because it didn't define your entire relationship with your kids, right? You
Mhm.
had this ability to reset and you were able to change, to a point where you are happy, you are healthy, and you do have these relationships. And there is something like really beautiful about that. And I've always said that if you are somebody who doesn't believe in change, what's the point? So
Yeah.
like we're gonna fail, and you're gonna fail when it comes to being a spouse, you're gonna fail when it comes to being a parent, you're gonna fail when it comes to being a business owner. We're all going to fail. But if you believe in change, that failure is what I love to say, that failure is a data point. It is just a
That's what
data
it
point.
is.
And
I
so now you
agree.
can take that data and you can figure out how to learn from that mistake and become something even greater. And like, you know, I've had so many great opportunities in the past years being able to show up where I never would have in the past, and like things like, being able to spend time with my grandfather before he passed. And, I talk about how if that Dana from 2012 had that same experience where, I had limited time with my grandfather, that Dana wouldn't have taken it, not because she didn't love him, but
Mm,
because
mm,
I didn't know that I could. And so you look back on it and
mm.
you're like, there's so much beauty that happened because of that failure. So I think when we're looking at things like this, it's like, don't beat yourself up, you know, and I say that as someone who still gets emotional about the mistakes that I've made. Um, but I'm emotional about it not because I'm mad at myself about it, but because I'm so grateful for who it has turned me into at the end of the day.
I could talk to you all day, and there's so much more that we could unpack.
I
But
know.
I'm watching the time fly, and there are just a couple of other quick questions that I
Yeah.
want to get out. There's one that I ask of every guest, and it
Mm,
is if you could, based on all of your personal and professional experience to date, if you could give one piece of advice to everybody
mm.
listening that would help them as much as possible in their career, what piece of advice would you give?
Oh man, that is a big loaded
I
question.
know. Yeah.
Um, Hmm. I think the thing that came to when you said that the first thing was don't settle. I think when we start our businesses, we have a passion and we have such a drive for what we want to do, and sometimes that passion and drive gets beaten down by experiences, clients, vendors, whatever, and then we tend to like we then want to change the way we approach things because of one bad client or one bad experience. And I am guilty of that myself, but I think just don't settle. Like, what your business is built on, your values, why you're in it, and just keep that in the forefront and just continue. Like the right clients are going to come around, they're going to come along, the right situations, the right doors are going to open. And I know that sounds super woo, but I really believe that fully, that when we are operating in our full authentic selves, like the opportunities are just boundless.
That is a beautiful place to leave things. Dana, this has just been a real treat. And it always happens. I'm primarily a conduit here to bring great information from
Mhm.
you, my guest, to our audience. But when it passes through me, I end up improving, getting better, getting inspired, and becoming more knowledgeable myself about business. If there are people that want to maybe reach out to connect with you, maybe even
Yeah.
to hire you, how
Mhm.
can people get in touch?
Yeah, my email is just dana@hustleandgather.com. I am on the Instagram at Hustle and Gather. It's probably the best way to reach me. But yeah, would love to connect. Even if it's just like I am a sucker for let's have a Zoom coffee call and just, just chat and see where we can uplift one another. Because as much as I love working with people to help them, they help me as well. So it is a mutual relationship. So reach out.
Well, Dana, on behalf of our Timeline Genius community and all of our Wedding Industry Insider listeners, I just want to say thank you again for taking time out of your day to share your wisdom and insights. We really are grateful for it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.